I stood at the entrance of the tennis club, my heart racing as I saw Jake, the coach, adjusting his racket. The moment felt surreal, a collision of my past life and the thrill of something new. I was married, seeking a little fun, but what was I really doing here? The tension in the air was thick, and the way Jake moved, with that effortless confidence, sent shivers down my spine. It was as if he could see right through me, his intense gaze igniting something deep within. I could almost hear my internal conflict echoing in my mind. Am I really about to do this? But there I was, drawn in by the magnetic pull he had over me. I had come to escape my mundane routine, to feel alive again, yet the heaviness of my commitment loomed like a dark cloud. Ready for your lesson? Jake's voice broke through my thoughts, smooth and inviting. I nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. As we began to rally, each swing of the racket felt electric, every shared laugh a silent agreement that we were both aware of the unspoken tension. "Nice shot," he teased, his smile making my heart race even faster. I could sense a connection forming, one that was both exhilarating and terrifying. What was I getting myself into? With each passing moment, I questioned my choices more and more. It was just tennis, wasn't it? But in the back of my mind, I knew it was more than that. I remember the first day I walked into that tennis club in Los Angeles, like it was yesterday. The sun was shining, and I felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. I was married, but I was looking for something more in my life. Something fun. Something just for me. As I stepped onto the glossy court, I spotted him. Jake, the coach, was adjusting his racket, his athletic frame radiating confidence. I felt a jolt of electricity in the air, a tension that was almost palpable. My heart raced as I watched him. His deep-set eyes caught mine, holding me captive for a moment that felt like forever. What am I doing here? I thought. I had to remind myself that I was just here to learn a sport, to break from my routine. But the flutter in my stomach told me otherwise. I brushed my thoughts aside, focusing instead on the game ahead. The first lesson was a whirlwind of activity and laughter. As I swung my racket, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. Between the drills, Jake would throw in little comments that made me laugh. I could feel the warmth of his gaze lingering on me, igniting a spark I thought had long been extinguished. "You have a natural swing," he said, a teasing smile on his lips. I felt my cheeks flush. "Thanks," I replied, trying to sound casual, but my voice was breathy, betraying the excitement inside me. Classes went on, and with each session, the flirts became more pronounced. It was the way he would stand close when he showed me a new technique, or how our fingers would brush against each other as he handed me a ball. Each small touch sent shivers down my spine. We shared stories about our lives outside of tennis, discovering common interests that made me feel a connection I hadn't anticipated. One evening after class, he turned to me with a serious look. "Would you like to grab a drink, just to celebrate your progress?" The question caught me off guard. My heart raced even faster. It seemed harmless enough, and I found myself nodding. "Sure, I'd love to." My mind raced with possibilities, but I pushed those thoughts away, reminding myself that this was just a friendly outing. We ended up at a small bar nearby, the atmosphere relaxed and inviting. As we sipped our drinks, the conversation flowed easily. Jake's laughter was infectious, and I felt myself slowly letting my guard down. "You know, I don't usually invite students out like this," he admitted, his gaze locked onto mine. "But there's something about you." I felt a thrill at his words, an intoxicating mix of flattery and intrigue. "I'm glad you did," I replied, feeling bold. "I've been needing a little fun in my life." I watched as his expression shifted slightly, something deeper lurking beneath his smile. There was an intensity in his eyes that set my heart racing. It was as if he could see right through me, peeling back the layers of my mundane life. As the evening progressed, I felt a magnetic pull towards him. We exchanged more than just laughter. There were shared glances that lingered a moment too long, touches that ignited something within me. "You're different," he said softly, leaning in closer, his breath warm against my skin. "You deserve to feel alive." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken promises. The night ended too soon, but as I drove home, my mind was racing. I thought about my husband, who was probably already asleep, blissfully unaware of the excitement I had just experienced. Guilt washed over me like a cold wave, but it was quickly tempered by the thrill of my evening with Jake. What was I getting myself into? I pushed those thoughts aside, telling myself that it was just a drink with a friend. The weeks rolled on, and our friendship deepened, blossoming into something I hadn't planned. The subtle flirting during lessons became more pronounced. I found myself looking forward to our time together, the anticipation building with each passing class. I could feel my heart tugging me in a direction I had never intended to go. One afternoon, as we wrapped up a particularly intense lesson, I felt a sense of longing. "You know," I said, trying to keep my tone light, "I never thought I'd enjoy tennis this much." Jake smiled, that wicked glint in his eye. "It's not just the sport, is it?" he replied, his voice low and teasing. I felt a rush of heat flood my cheeks. "Maybe not," I admitted, biting my lip. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was an innocent enough touch. His hand brushed against mine as he reached for a ball. But in that instant, something ignited between us. I felt a spark, a rush of desire that took my breath away. I looked up at him, our eyes locked, and the world around us faded away. I started, but the words wouldn't come. "Let's take this slow," he suggested, his voice a whisper. But there was a challenge in his gaze, and I felt a thrill of excitement at the thought of what could be. My heart raced at the idea of crossing that line, of stepping into a world that was both thrilling and terrifying. I knew I was treading on dangerous ground, but the allure was too strong to resist. As I left the club that day, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the brink of something monumental. I was caught in a web of emotions, yearning for the thrill of what was becoming an undeniable connection with Jake. I glanced back one last time, and he was watching me, that same intense look in his eyes. I felt a rush of exhilaration mixed with fear. What was I doing? What was I willing to risk? I stood at the edge of the tennis court, my heart racing as I watched Jake, the coach, adjusting his racket. The tension in the air was almost tangible, swirling around us like a charged current. I had come here, married and looking for a bit of fun, but I hadn't expected the wave of emotions that would crash over me at that moment. Jake's intense gaze locked onto mine, and I felt a jolt of electricity that made my breath hitch. What am I doing here? The question echoed in my mind, but I couldn't bring myself to look away. He was everything I didn't know I wanted, a mix of confidence and charisma that drew me in like a moth to a flame. I shifted my weight nervously, reminding myself of the life I had built, the husband I loved, and the responsibilities that came with it. Yet, standing there, all I could think about was how alive I felt in that moment. "Ready for your lesson?" Jake called out, a playful smirk dancing on his lips. His voice was smooth, with a hint of challenge that made my stomach flutter. "Yeah, I think so," I replied, trying to sound casual, but my voice betrayed me, laced with a tremor of anticipation. As we began to play, I felt the rhythm of the game flow through me. Each swing of the racket was a release, a brief escape from the mundane routine of my marriage. Jake moved effortlessly across the court, his athleticism captivating. I couldn't help but admire how the sunlight glinted off his toned arms, and how his smile seemed to light up the whole space. "Nice shot," he complimented, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. I felt a blush creeping up my cheeks, a warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the physical exertion. "Thanks. You make it easy," I replied, trying to match his playful tone. As the lessons progressed, our conversations began to shift. What started as casual banter about tennis evolved into discussions about our lives, our dreams, and our fears. It felt intoxicating to share these secrets with him, to allow myself to be vulnerable in a way I hadn't been able to with anyone else in years. "Have you ever thought about what you really want?" Jake asked one day, his expression serious. We had just finished a particularly intense session, our bodies glistening with sweat. "I don't know," I admitted, biting my lip. "I guess I thought I wanted the perfect family, the perfect life." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "And do you?" I hesitated, the weight of his question pressing down on me. "Sometimes I wonder if there's more out there." The air between us thickened, and for a moment, I felt as if we were the only two people in the world. There was a spark, a connection that both excited and terrified me. Then came the first accidental touch. It happened during a particularly close rally. I lunged for the ball, and our hands brushed against each other. A shockwave of desire coursed through me, and I could see the surprise mirrored in his eyes. "Sorry," I blurted out, pulling my hand back. "No need to apologize," he said softly, his voice low. "It's just a game, right?" But it was more than a game. I could feel it, and I sensed he could too. From that day on, our text messages took on a new tone. They became bolder, filled with playful teasing and flirtation that sent shivers down my spine. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow," he wrote one night, followed by a winky face. My heart raced as I read the words, excitement mingling with guilt. I glanced at my husband, who was engrossed in his work, completely unaware of the turmoil brewing inside me. I found myself hesitating more and more around my husband. He was always busy, focused on his career, while I felt increasingly drawn to Jake's world. I started to question my own happiness, my desires, and what I truly wanted out of life. "Are you okay?" my husband asked one evening, looking up from his laptop. "You seem distracted." "Just a lot on my mind," I replied, forcing a smile. He nodded, returning to his work, oblivious to the storm of emotions I was navigating. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling of longing for something more. Jake had stirred something in me that I thought was long buried, and I was terrified of where it might lead. The days turned into a blur of lessons, laughter, and a growing connection with Jake. Each interaction felt charged, electric. I found myself daydreaming about him, about the thrill of being with someone who saw me as more than just a wife. One day, after class, Jake invited me for a drink. "Just to celebrate your progress," he said, but I could see the glint in his eyes. "Sure, why not?" I replied, my heart racing at the thought of being alone with him. As we sat at the bar, the conversation flowed easily, and the chemistry between us was undeniable. I laughed at his jokes, feeling lighter than I had in years. But beneath the surface, I could feel the guilt creeping in. "What's on your mind?" Jake asked, his gaze piercing through my facade. "Just life, I guess," I said, avoiding his eyes. "Life can be complicated," he said, leaning closer. "But it doesn't have to be boring." I took a deep breath, the weight of my reality pressing down on me. "I know what you mean." That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't escape the questions swirling in my mind. Was I willing to risk everything for the excitement and connection I felt with Jake? The thought both thrilled and terrified me. I was on the edge of something profound, but where would it lead? I stood in the tennis club, my heart racing as I watched Jake, the coach, adjusting his racket. The way he moved, so focused and confident, sent a jolt of electricity through the air. I couldn't help but admire the way his muscles flexed under his fitted shirt. I felt an unexpected thrill, one I hadn't experienced in a long time. It struck me that I was here, married and searching for a bit of fun, and yet my thoughts were all consumed by this man. What am I doing here? I asked myself as I tried to shake off the feeling. My husband was at home, busy with work, while I stood in this lively club filled with laughter and energy. I had come here looking to unwind, perhaps to meet new people, but now I felt like I was standing on the edge of something dangerous. Jake looked up and caught my gaze. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. His eyes were intense, locking onto mine, with an undeniable chemistry that sent shivers down my spine. "Ready for some practice?" he asked, a teasing smile dancing on his lips. I could barely form words as I nodded, my heart hammering in my chest. As we began, the tension between us was palpable. Each swing of the racket sent a rush of adrenaline coursing through me. I tried to focus on the game, but my thoughts kept drifting back to him. The way he laughed, the warmth in his voice, it was intoxicating. The flirty banter we shared felt like a dance, each comment layered with a hidden meaning. "Come on, you can hit harder than that," he encouraged, his eyes sparkling with mischief. I felt a rush of determination mixed with something deeper, something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. With every lesson, I found myself looking forward to our time together. Our conversations expanded beyond tennis, revealing shared interests and a connection I had never anticipated. I was surprised to discover how easily we clicked, like two pieces of a puzzle coming together. One evening, as our lesson came to an end, he looked at me with an intensity that made my heart skip a beat. "How about grabbing a drink after this?" he suggested, his tone casual, but his gaze burning with curiosity. I hesitated for a moment, a rush of guilt washing over me. "I don't know. My husband. Just one drink. No pressure," he replied, his smile disarming. "I promise it will be fun." I found myself nodding, caught in the spell of his charm. The idea of a simple drink felt innocent enough, but I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in my gut. I was crossing a line, and yet, the thrill of it was exhilarating. Later, as I sat across from Jake in a dimly lit bar, I felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The atmosphere was vibrant, the air thick with laughter and music, but all I could focus on was him. The way he leaned closer, the way his laughter echoed in my ears, it all felt intoxicating. "Here's to new friendships," he proposed, raising his glass with a smirk. I clinked my glass against his, my heart racing at the intimacy of the moment. As the night wore on, our conversation deepened, laughter flowing easily between us. I found myself hanging onto his every word, the way he spoke igniting a spark inside me that I thought had long since dimmed. "Do you ever wish you could just escape?" he asked suddenly, his gaze piercing through me. "Leave everything behind for a moment of freedom?" His question hung in the air, and I felt a strange sense of longing. "Sometimes," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But it's complicated." "Life is complicated," he replied, a hint of challenge in his tone. "But that doesn't mean we can't enjoy it." The tension in the air shifted, thickening as our eyes locked once more. I felt my breath hitch in my throat, and before I could think rationally, I leaned in closer. "What do you mean?" I asked. My curiosity piqued. He reached out, his fingers brushing against mine, sending a shockwave of desire through me. Sometimes we all need a little adventure," he murmured, his voice low and inviting. Then, without warning, he leaned in and pressed his lips against mine. The kiss was unexpected, a spark igniting within me that I had never felt before. It was electric and intoxicating, pulling me into a whirlwind of emotions. I kissed him back, feeling the world around us fade into oblivion. But in the back of my mind, a voice reminded me of my husband, waiting for me at home. Guilt washed over me as I pulled away, my heart racing. "Jake, I can't," I whispered, panic creeping into my voice. "Just for tonight," he urged, his eyes searching mine. "Let go of everything else." I was torn, battling the desire surging within me against the reality of my life. But the thrill of the unknown was too potent, pulling me deeper into this web of temptation. As I sat there, breathless and conflicted, I realized that this was just the beginning of something that could change everything. I'm standing there, watching Jake, my tennis coach, adjusting his racket, and the tension is almost unbearable. The way he moves is both confident and casual, and I can't help but feel a rush of excitement. His focus is so intense, and for a moment, it feels like the whole world has faded away, leaving just the two of us in this charged atmosphere. I remember how I ended up here. Married and looking for a bit of fun, I thought joining a tennis club would be a harmless way to break the monotony of my routine. But now, as I watch Jake, I can't shake the feeling that this was a mistake. The question echoes in my mind. What am I doing here? I should be at home with my husband, enjoying a quiet evening, not here, feeling this unexpected spark. As I step onto the court for my lesson, I try to push the thoughts aside. But Jake's eyes catch mine, and there's something electric in the air. It's like we're the only two people who matter in that moment. My heart races, and I feel a thrill run down my spine. The way he smirks when he sees me, the playful banter that follows. It all feels too good to be true. "Ready to get your game on?" he asks, his voice low and teasing. "Always," I reply, trying to sound nonchalant, but my heart is pounding in my chest. The lessons start, and I can't help but notice the way he moves, the strength in his arms as he demonstrates a serve. I feel a flush creeping up my neck. I've always loved sports, but I've never felt this kind of chemistry with a coach before. It's thrilling and terrifying at the same time. Throughout the class, we exchange light touches, brief brushes of our hands that send shockwaves through me. Each laugh and every shared glance feels like it's loaded with unspoken words. I can feel the connection growing stronger, and it scares me. I start to question everything about my life. Why am I drawn to him so much? After the lesson, as I'm packing my things, he leans in closer, his breath warm against my ear. "You want to grab a drink after this?" Just to unwind. My breath catches. It sounds innocent enough, but I can sense the underlying tension. "Sure, why not?" I say, my voice barely above a whisper. I can't believe I just agreed to that. As we walk to the bar, I feel a mix of excitement and dread. The place is dimly lit, and the atmosphere is relaxed. We find a small table in the corner, and as soon as we sit down, the conversation flows effortlessly. We talk about everything and nothing, our laughter ringing out in the space around us. "You know," Jake says, leaning back in his chair, "I didn't expect you to be so much fun. Most of my clients are, well, let's just say they're not as lively." I chuckle. "Well, I'm not most clients. I'm here to enjoy myself." His gaze turns serious for a moment, and I can see the curiosity in his eyes. "What's a girl like you doing in a place like this?" I hesitate, feeling the weight of my marriage pressing down on me. "Just looking for a little escape," I admit. "My life has been routine, I guess." "I get that," he says, and for a brief moment, I see a flicker of understanding in his expression. Sometimes we all need a break from reality. Our conversation deepens, revealing layers of ourselves that I never expected to share. I find comfort in the way Jake listens, really listens, as if my words hold more weight than they do. I can't help but wonder if he feels the same pull that I do. As the evening wears on, the energy shifts, becoming charged with something more than just friendship. I can feel the tension between us thickening, and my heart races as I realize I'm considering something I've never thought I would. Maybe we should do this more often, I suggest, my voice barely a whisper. Jake's gaze locks onto mine, and for a moment, everything else fades away. I'd like that, he replies, the tension palpable between us. We finish our drinks, and I can't shake the feeling that this is just the beginning. I know it's risky, and I should be thinking about my husband, but all I can think about is Jake, and the way he makes me feel alive. As I leave the bar, a part of me is still questioning my choices. I can't help but wonder what I've gotten myself into. But as I glance back at Jake, standing there with that confident smirk, I feel a rush of excitement. Maybe this is exactly what I need. I get home that night, and my husband is already asleep, oblivious to the turmoil brewing inside me. I crawl into bed, my heart still racing from the evening, and I can't shake the anticipation of what's to come. The thrill of the unknown is intoxicating, and I find myself longing for more. I close my eyes, but sleep eludes me as I replay every moment from the bar. Jake's laughter, the way he looked at me, the undeniable chemistry that sparked between us. It feels like I'm standing at the edge of a cliff, teetering on the brink of something thrilling and terrifying. I know I'm playing with fire, but a part of me craves the heat. And just like that, I know I'm in too deep. The question isn't just what I'm doing here, but what I'm willing to risk for the thrill of a passion that feels so forbidden, yet so exhilarating. I'm standing at the tennis club, my heart racing as I watch Jake, the coach, adjusting his racket. The sun is beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the courts. But all I can focus on is him. His movements are fluid, confident, and there's something about the way he tightens his grip that sends a shiver down my spine. I can't deny the tension in the air, thick and charged, as if the world around us has faded away. I came here to escape, to find a bit of fun in my otherwise mundane life. Married for years, I thought I knew what I wanted. But standing here, I feel a stirring of something unfamiliar. The question echoes in my mind. What am I doing here? I glance around, taking in the other players, the laughter, the clattering of tennis balls, but my focus keeps returning to Jake. His dark hair, the way it falls just above his forehead, the intensity of his gaze when he catches my eye. It's electric. Are you going to join us? Or just stare? He teases, breaking me from my reverie. I force a laugh, trying to play it cool. I was just admiring your technique. He smirks, a wicked grin that makes my stomach flutter. Well, you might want to get a closer look then. I swallow hard, feeling the weight of his words. I have no idea how I ended up in this situation, but the thrill of it is undeniable. This isn't just tennis. It's an awakening. As the days pass, I find myself looking forward to my lessons more than I should. The first day at the club felt liberating. I walked in, my heart fluttering with the excitement of something new. Each lesson becomes a dance between us, filled with laughter and fleeting touches that linger longer than they should. I notice how his fingers brush against my arm when he demonstrates a serve, how our eyes lock during casual banter. "Did you watch the match last night?" he asks one day, leaning closer. "Only the highlights. I was busy," I reply, my voice barely above a whisper, and he raises an eyebrow, a playful challenge in his gaze. "Busy doing what? Not playing tennis, I hope." I chuckle, a nervous laugh that surprises me. "Definitely not. Just the usual." "More like the boring routine of married life?" he suggests, his tone teasing but layered with something deeper. I hesitate, caught off guard. You could say that. As the weeks go by, our conversations grow more intimate, revealing layers of ourselves we've kept hidden. I share stories about my childhood, and he talks about his passion for the game. I never thought I'd enjoy teaching so much, he confesses one evening, his eyes sparkling. But you make it interesting. I feel a warmth spread through me at his words. I'm just trying to keep up with you. The flirting becomes bolder. A touch here, a lingering laugh there, and I can feel the tension between us growing. One evening, after a particularly intense lesson, Jake leans in closer. I can smell his cologne, a mix of something fresh and woody. It's intoxicating. Let's grab a drink after class tomorrow, he suggests, his voice low and inviting. I hesitate, a rush of excitement battling with the voice of caution in my head. Just one drink? Just one, he promises, but the way he says it makes it clear he's not just talking about a drink. The next day, I find myself sitting across from him at a small bar nearby, the atmosphere buzzing with energy. The initial thrill of rebellion washes over me, and as we sip our drinks, I feel a sense of freedom I haven't experienced in a long time. We share stories, our laughter echoing in the dimly lit space, and I can't help but notice how his eyes linger on my lips. Is this what you do for fun? I ask, trying to sound nonchalant. Depends on the company, he replies, his gaze intense. I bite my lip, the tension between us palpable. It's just a drink, I remind myself, but every second spent with him feels loaded with possibility. As the days turn into weeks, my life becomes a carefully crafted web of lies and secrets. I find myself struggling to maintain the normalcy of my home life, while my thoughts drift to Jake. Each phone call from him sends a thrill through my body, and I can't help but feel exhilarated by the risk. Are you ready for our lesson? He teases over the phone one afternoon. Of course, I reply, my heart racing at the thought of seeing him again. I'll be there. But the truth is, the more I see him, the more I want him. The guilt I feel towards my husband starts to fade, replaced by an overwhelming desire to be with Jake. It's like a drug, and I am hopelessly addicted. Can you keep a secret? Jake asks one evening, his eyes dark with mischief. Depends, I say, my heart pounding. Meet me at the hotel after our lesson, he whispers, and my breath catches in my throat. Are you serious? I can hardly believe what I'm hearing. Absolutely. Just you and me, he insists, his voice low, sending shivers down my spine. I know I shouldn't, but the thrill of it calls to me. I nod, my mind racing with the possibilities. I'm stepping into uncharted territory, but I can't turn back now. Each moment spent with Jake transforms my dull existence into something vibrant and alive. As I prepare for our meeting, I know deep down that I'm crossing a line. But the excitement of this new world, the adrenaline rush of being with him, makes me feel more alive than I have in years. The routine of my life is now a game, and I am playing for keeps. I stood at the entrance of the tennis club, my heart racing as I spotted Jake, the coach, adjusting his racket. The tension in the air was almost palpable, a mixture of excitement and apprehension. I had come here, married and searching for a little fun, but now I found myself questioning everything. The way he moved, the focus in his eyes, made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. It was as if electricity flowed between us, igniting something deep within me. What am I doing here? I thought, my mind racing. My husband was at home, probably consumed with work, while I was standing here, caught in a whirlwind of emotions. I had never imagined that a simple tennis lesson could lead me to this moment, where my heart pounded in my chest and my breath hitched at the sight of him. As I approached the court, I tried to shake off the feeling. I reminded myself that I was just here to learn the game. But Jake's intense gaze met mine, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. He flashed a charming smile, and I felt a flutter in my stomach as I stepped onto the court. "Ready to get started?" he asked, his voice smooth and inviting. "Absolutely," I replied, trying to sound confident. But inside, I was a bundle of nerves. The first lesson was a blur of laughter and light-hearted banter. Jake was a natural, effortlessly guiding me through the basics while making me feel like I could conquer the court. With each rally, our playful exchanges turned into flirty glances, and I couldn't help but feel drawn to him. It was exhilarating, like we were the only two people in the world. "Nice shot," he called out, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. I could feel a warmth spread through me, and I smiled back, trying to hide the blush creeping up my cheeks. "Thanks. I think I'm getting the hang of it," I replied, feeling a sense of freedom wash over me. It was just me and him. No responsibilities, no expectations. It felt good to escape the routine of my life, even if just for a moment. As the weeks went by, our friendship blossomed. I looked forward to each lesson, the way he would lean in closer to correct my grip or adjust my stance. Every casual touch sent a thrill through me, and the playful teasing became a dance of unspoken desires. We discovered shared interests, books, music, and a love for adventure. It was easy to forget about my life outside the club, the mundane chores, and the never-ending work my husband had. One afternoon, after an especially good session, Jake invited me for a drink. "What do you say? Just a quick one to celebrate your progress?" he suggested, a hint of mischief in his eyes. I hesitated for a moment, a voice in my head warning me to be careful. But the thrill of saying yes was intoxicating. "Sure, why not?" I replied, feeling a rush of excitement. We ended up at a cozy bar not far from the club. The atmosphere was relaxed, dimly lit with soft music playing in the background. We talked and laughed, the chemistry simmering just below the surface. As the evening wore on, I could feel the tension between us building, an invisible thread pulling us closer. "You're really amazing, you know that?" Jake said, his gaze locked onto mine. I felt my heart race, and I couldn't help but smile. "Thanks, but I think you're the one who makes it fun," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. His eyes sparkled with admiration, and I felt a flutter of hope. Then, without thinking, I leaned in slightly, and in that moment, everything shifted. His hand brushed against mine, and I gasped softly. It was just a touch, but it ignited something deep within me, a flame that had been smoldering for far too long. "Sorry, did I cross a line?" he asked, his voice low and almost teasing. "No, not at all," I breathed, feeling bold. "I liked it." As if pulled by an invisible force, he moved closer, and before I knew it, our lips met in a soft, tentative kiss. It sent shockwaves through me, leaving me breathless. I pulled away, my heart pounding. "Wow," I said, trying to process what had just happened. "Wow, indeed," Jake replied, his eyes dark with desire. "We should probably take it slow, though." "Right," I managed, but the thrill of that moment lingered, making it hard to focus on anything else. I felt alive, caught in the whirlwind of emotions that came with the thrill of the forbidden. As I drove home that night, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. I could picture my husband at home, unsuspecting, while I had just shared something electric with Jake. The thrill of it all filled me with excitement, but also guilt. What was I doing? I was crossing lines I never thought I would. But the spark I felt with Jake was undeniable, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. I felt my heart race as I walked into the tennis club that day. The air was thick with anticipation, and the faint scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the aroma of sunscreen and sweat. I spotted Jake, the coach, adjusting his racket at the far end of the court. The way he moved was so confident, so assured. It sent a shiver down my spine. I couldn't help but remember how I ended up there, married and seeking a little thrill in my otherwise predictable life. I was just looking for a distraction, a way to escape the monotony of my routine. My husband was always busy, consumed by work and his endless commitments. I thought a few tennis lessons would be harmless fun. But now, standing there, I felt an unexplainable tension in the air, like static electricity crackling around us. Jake caught my eye, and the intensity of his gaze made my breath hitch. It was as if he could see right through me, peeling back the layers of my carefully constructed facade. What am I doing here? The question echoed relentlessly in my mind, battling against the flutter of excitement that surged through me. Was I really ready to flirt with temptation? I pushed the thought aside, trying to focus on the game ahead. But as I took my place on the court, my heart thudded with each swing of my racket, each laugh shared with Jake. Our first lesson started off like any other. I felt a sense of freedom as I stepped onto the court, the sun warming my skin and the sound of laughter filling the air. Jake was patient, his encouragement making me feel alive. I couldn't help but notice how our interactions grew more playful. The subtle flirts were hard to ignore, the way his fingers brushed against mine when he demonstrated a serve, or the way we shared laughter over my less-than-perfect swings. "Nice try," he chuckled, his voice deep and warm. "You'll get there. Just keep your eye on the ball." "Easy for you to say," I replied, pretending to feign annoyance, but I couldn't suppress my smile. There was something about him that drew me in, igniting a spark I hadn't felt in ages. As the weeks passed, our friendship deepened. We discovered shared interests beyond tennis, music, art, even favorite books. It felt refreshing to connect with someone on that level. One day, after class, Jake turned to me with a smirk. "Hey, how about we grab a drink? Just a casual thing, you know?" I hesitated. The idea of going out for drinks with him sent butterflies flitting in my stomach. "Sure, why not?" I heard myself say, the words spilling out before I could think twice. That first drink turned into laughter over shared stories, and as the night wore on, I felt myself letting go of my inhibitions. Jake leaned in closer, and I felt the warmth radiating from him. Our conversations grew more intimate, revealing secrets and desires I hadn't dared to share with anyone else. "Tell me something. What do you really want?" he asked, his eyes boring into mine, searching for something deeper. The question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Instead, I felt a rush of emotions battling within me. I wanted to say I wanted freedom, excitement, something more than the life I had settled for. But I couldn't find the courage. Then came the first accidental touch. It was during one of our lessons. My racket slipped from my grasp, and I stumbled slightly. Jake reached out to steady me, his fingers brushing against my arm. A jolt of electricity shot through me, igniting an unexpected wave of desire. I looked up at him, and in that moment, I saw the same hunger reflected in his eyes. The messages started to come in, flirty, playful, and then a bit more daring. Each notification sent a thrill through me. I found myself looking forward to our conversations, the way he made me feel alive. Yet, with every message, the guilt crept in. My husband was home, blissfully unaware of the turmoil brewing within me. As I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. My husband's steady breathing next to me was a painful reminder of the life I was betraying. But Jake's messages were a siren call, pulling me closer to a world I had only glimpsed. "Can we meet outside of class?" Jake texted one evening, the words lighting up my phone like a beacon. My heart raced at the thought. I could already picture it, a bar away from prying eyes, a chance to explore this connection further. I decided to go, driven by a mix of excitement and fear. That night was electric. The chemistry between us was undeniable. It felt as if the world had melted away, leaving only the two of us wrapped in a bubble of desire. When our lips finally met, it was like a match striking fire. I lost myself in the kiss, feeling every ounce of guilt dissipate, if only for a moment. Afterwards, the weight of my choices crashed over me like a tidal wave. I remembered my husband, the life we had built, and guilt wrapped its cold fingers around my heart. But the thrill of what I had experienced with Jake was intoxicating. I was caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, drawn to him even as I fought against the pull of my conscience. Days turned into weeks, and my feelings for Jake grew stronger. We began to meet more often, each encounter heightening the stakes. I found myself in a game of risk, balancing my life at home with my secret affair. The adrenaline was thrilling, but it was also exhausting. I craved the comfort of my marriage, yet the excitement of my time with Jake was addictive. One evening, Jake sent me a message that sent shivers down my spine. "What are you willing to risk for this?" His question haunted me as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. My husband's steady presence beside me felt like a chainsaw cutting through the fabric of my desires. I was torn between a comfortable life and the passionate connection I had found with Jake. The dilemma weighed heavily on me, and I realized I had to make a choice. But deep down, I wasn't sure I was ready to let go of either life. I was trapped in a web of forbidden desire, and the thought of continuing on this path both thrilled and terrified me. How far was I willing to go? The question lingered in the back of my mind like a shadow, always present, always waiting for an answer. As I stood at the entrance of the tennis club, I could feel the palpable tension in the air. It wasn't just the excitement of being here, away from the mundane routines of my life. It was the sight of Jake, the coach, adjusting his racket that sent a surge of electricity through me. The way he moved, so effortlessly confident, drew me in. Just a few days ago, I was happily married, seeking a little fun to break the monotony of my life. But now, I found myself questioning everything. What am I doing here? I thought, a mix of curiosity and a thrill of danger coursing through me. I had always played it safe, but something about Jake ignited a spark I hadn't felt in years. He caught my eye across the court, and our gazes locked for a moment that felt like an eternity. I could see the amusement in his eyes, as if he knew the effect he had on me. "Ready to serve?" Jake called out, his voice smooth and inviting. Yeah, I think so," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I felt a blush creeping up my cheeks as I moved closer to him. The first day of class was meant to be just that, a class. But as I walked onto the court, the air buzzed with a sense of freedom I hadn't realized I craved. I had traded my heels for tennis shoes, and for the first time in a long while, I felt alive. The laughter and subtle flirtations during the lessons seemed innocent, yet I could feel the undercurrents of something more. After a particularly fun lesson, Jake suggested we grab a drink. "What do you say? Just one drink after class?" he asked, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "Sure, why not?" I found myself saying, even though a small voice in my head warned me of the potential consequences. As we sat down, the conversation flowed easily, revealing shared interests outside of tennis, our love for travel, music, and even a few guilty pleasure movies. Each laugh, each touch of our hands felt charged with unspoken tension. I had forgotten how exhilarating it was to connect with someone on that level. But as our friendship deepened, so did my internal struggle. I found myself sharing secrets with Jake, things I had never told anyone else. "You know," I confessed one evening, "sometimes I feel trapped in my own life." He leaned in closer, his voice low and intimate. "I get it. Life can be suffocating sometimes, but it doesn't have to be." Those words lingered in my mind long after our conversation ended. It was as if he was inviting me to step into a different world, one where I wasn't just a wife or a mother, but someone who could truly feel alive again. The first accidental touch of his hand against mine sent shivers down my spine, igniting a desire I thought I had buried. As the weeks passed, our banter turned into something more. Text messages became flirtatious, each one more daring than the last. "What are you doing tonight?" he would text, and my heart would race at the thought of him wanting me. It was a thrill, a dangerous game I never expected to play. "Busy with the usual," I would reply, my mind racing with the thought of what could be. Each message pulled me further away from my husband, who seemed oblivious to my growing restlessness. I remember the night I made the impulsive decision to meet Jake at a bar. My heart pounded in my chest as I entered the dimly lit space, hoping the shadows would hide my guilt. When Jake walked in, the entire room faded away. The tension between us was electric, and I could feel it in every fiber of my being. "Hey," he said, his voice low and inviting. "You made it." "I couldn't resist," I replied, a smile breaking through my nervousness. We talked, and the conversation flowed like it always did, but this time, the air was thick with unspoken desire. As the night wore on, the space between us shrank until our lips finally met in a kiss that ignited a fire within me. It was soft at first, a tentative exploration, but soon turned passionate, filled with all the longing that had built up over the weeks. I pulled back, breathless. "What are we doing?" Jake looked deep into my eyes, his expression serious. "I don't know, but I can't stop thinking about you." A wave of guilt washed over me as I remembered my husband, waiting at home, blissfully unaware. Yet, as I gazed into Jake's eyes, I felt alive, something I hadn't felt in ages. The thrill of the moment overwhelmed me, but so did the guilt. Days turned into weeks, and what started as innocent flirtation blossomed into a full-blown affair. Our meetings became more frequent, and the adrenaline of sneaking around was intoxicating. Each stolen moment felt like a dangerous game, and I was addicted. I tried to maintain the facade of normalcy at home. My husband was busy with work, and I was good at hiding my emotions. Yet, every time my phone buzzed with a message from Jake, a thrill would rush through me, momentarily pushing aside the guilt that lingered in the background. "Can you meet me tonight?" Jake would text, and I would feel a rush of excitement, as if I were living a double life. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. The lies I told my husband about tennis lessons and late meetings felt heavy on my conscience, but the thought of Jake waiting for me was always enough to silence my doubts. One weekend, I made the bold decision to spend the night at Jake's apartment. I concocted an elaborate excuse about a work trip, and my heart raced at the thought of the adventure ahead. "Are you sure about this?" I asked Jake as we lay together, the city lights twinkling outside the window. "Absolutely," he replied, pulling me closer. "This is what we both want." And in that moment, I believed him. The passion we shared was indescribable, and every kiss, every touch felt like a fire igniting within me. I was lost in a whirlwind of desire, forgetting all the reasons I shouldn't be there. But as the weekend came to an end, I was faced with the reality of my choices. The thrill of living this double life was intoxicating, yet the guilt of betraying my husband gnawed at me relentlessly. "Are you going to keep doing this?" I whispered to myself, knowing deep down that I was teetering on the edge of something I couldn't fully understand. As I lay in bed, I felt a mix of exhilaration and fear. I was caught in a web of desire, and the question lingered: how far was I willing to go for Jake? The temptation to continue was strong, but the weight of my actions was starting to feel unbearable. In that moment, I realized that I was standing at a crossroads, one that would change the course of my life forever. I stood at the edge of the tennis court, my heart racing as I watched Jake, the coach, adjust his racket. He was tall, with an athletic build that made my breath hitch. The sunlight caught his dark hair, and for a moment, I forgot I was a married woman, standing here in this club, searching for a little fun. The tension in the air was almost palpable, like static electricity, buzzing between us. I could feel my cheeks flush as I caught his eye. His intense gaze sent shivers down my spine. "What are you doing here?" I thought to myself, my inner voice echoing with uncertainty. I was supposed to be here to learn tennis, to escape the mundane routine of my life. But as Jake flashed a charming smile in my direction, I felt something shift inside me. I was at a crossroads, teetering on the edge of a decision that could change everything. It was a beautiful Saturday morning in Los Angeles. I had convinced myself that taking a few lessons would bring some excitement back into my life. My husband, Mark, was always busy with work, and I found myself yearning for connection. A thrill. Something to make me feel alive again. But I didn't expect to find that spark in someone like Jake. He was just a coach, a handsome stranger who seemed to have an effortless charm that drew me in. "Ready to serve?" he asked, breaking me from my thoughts. His voice was deep and smooth, sending butterflies fluttering in my stomach. Yes. I think so," I stammered, trying to sound more confident than I felt. As I picked up the racket, I noticed the way his eyes sparkled with amusement. I felt like a novice, not just in tennis, but in life. The first few lessons passed in a blur of flirts and laughter. Each time I stepped onto the court, I felt a mixture of excitement and dread. Jake had a way of making me feel special, like I was the only one in the world that mattered. We shared jokes, exchanged playful banter, and before long, our conversations drifted from tennis to our personal lives. "Do you play any other sports?" he asked one day, a teasing grin on his face. "I used to love swimming, but it's been ages," I replied, surprised at how easy it was to talk to him. "Maybe we should hit the pool sometime. Just for fun, of course," he suggested, his eyes glinting with mischief. "Right, just fun," I echoed, a nervous laugh escaping my lips. I could feel the tension between us growing, thickening the air around us. Then came the unexpected invitation. "How about we grab a drink after class, just to unwind?" His casual tone belied the weight of his words. I hesitated, the thought of it sending a thrill through me. "Sure, why not?" I replied, my heart pounding. I didn't know where this was headed, but I was curious and, if I were honest, excited. That evening, as we sat at a cozy bar, the atmosphere felt electric. The drinks flowed, and with each sip, I felt my inhibitions slip away. Jake leaned closer, our knees brushing under the table. "You have this spark about you, you know," he said, his voice low and inviting. I looked into his eyes, and for the first time, I felt free. "I think I've just been waiting for someone to notice," I admitted, feeling a rush of vulnerability. "Trust me, I've noticed," he replied, his gaze lingering on my lips. I could feel the heat rising between us, the air thick with unspoken desire. As the weeks went by, our friendship deepened. We shared secrets, our dreams, and even our fears. Jake became my escape, a breath of fresh air in my otherwise suffocating life. But with each passing day, I felt a growing conflict inside me. One afternoon, during practice, our hands accidentally brushed while reaching for the same ball. The moment felt charged, and I froze, my heart racing. Jake looked at me, his eyes dark with intensity. "Did you feel that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, unable to find my voice. It was a simple touch, yet it ignited a fire within me that I had long forgotten. "Let's not pretend this isn't happening," he said, stepping closer. "There's something between us, and it's only going to get stronger." I felt a rush of excitement, mixed with dread. "But I'm married," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop myself. "I know," he replied, his expression softening. "But does it feel right? The way you are with him?" I couldn't answer. The truth was, Mark was often preoccupied with work, leaving me feeling lonely and unfulfilled. The contrast between my life with him and the thrilling connection I shared with Jake was stark. As our flirtation grew bolder, I found myself caught in a web of emotions. Late-night texts started to arrive, each one more daring than the last. "What are you thinking about right now?" he would ask, and I would feel my cheeks flush as I typed back, "You." I was treading dangerous waters, and yet I was drawn to him like a moth to a flame. My heart raced every time my phone buzzed with a message from Jake, and I couldn't resist the pull. One evening, I found myself pacing the living room, waiting for Mark to come home. The guilt weighed heavily on my chest, but I couldn't shake the thrill of being with Jake. I knew it was wrong, yet the thought of him sent shivers down my spine. "Rough day?" Mark asked as he walked in, brushing his suit jacket off. "Just tired," I lied, offering a forced smile. I couldn't tell him that my mind was elsewhere, that I was craving someone who wasn't him. In the following weeks, I felt as if I were living a double life. I'd laugh with Mark over dinner, while my mind wandered to Jake and the thrill of our stolen moments. Each day felt like a tightrope walk, balancing the security of my marriage with the intoxicating allure of the forbidden. Then came the day when everything changed. I met Jake in a secluded spot, a little cafe tucked away from prying eyes. The moment I saw him, my heart soared. "Hey there," he said with a smile, his voice warm and inviting. "Hi," I replied, my pulse quickening. As we talked, the chemistry between us ignited. "I can't help but think about you," he confessed, leaning closer. "Every single day." I felt a rush of excitement. "Me too," I admitted, my heart racing. In that moment, I knew the stakes were rising. I was standing on the edge, the thrill of what we were doing pulling me in deeper. The thought of losing this connection terrified me, even as I knew I was crossing a line I could never uncross. As I looked into his eyes, I felt the weight of my choices pressing down on me. This was my new reality, one filled with passion and excitement, but also with the heavy burden of betrayal. And in that moment, I couldn't deny it any longer. I was lost in this whirlwind of desire, and I was not sure I wanted to be found.